Welcome back to Reddit Whispers. My name was Leo, and I was a history teacher. That feels like a lifetime ago, like a character I read about in one of my own textbooks. Leo was a simple man. He found joy in the dusty smell of old books, in the flicker of understanding in a student's eyes when they finally grasped the fall of Rome or the complexities of the Silk Road. His world was quiet, ordered, and meaningful. He believed in the slow, steady work of building a life, much like building a lesson plan, piece by piece, until it formed a coherent whole. He was engaged to a woman named Ava, and he thought she was a part of that plan, the most beautiful and vibrant piece. But Ava's world wasn't quiet or ordered. Her world was a constant, screaming broadcast. She was an aspiring influencer, a term I barely understood at the time. To me, it just meant she spent a lot of time on her phone, framing the perfect shot of her latte, her new shoes, her face. Her life wasn't lived, it was curated. Her friends, Chloe and Jessica, were the same, a trio of digital ghosts chasing the fleeting high of likes and shares. I didn't get it, but I loved her, so I tried to. I smiled for the selfies, I held the phone for the 1,000th take of her outfit of the day video, and I endured the endless talk of algorithms, engagement metrics, and collaborations. I thought it was a harmless hobby, a phase. I didn't realize it was a religion, and I was about to become the human sacrifice. The filming started subtly. At first, it was just us, her recording me doing something mundane. I'd be trying to assemble a ridiculously complicated piece of Swedish furniture, swearing under my breath as a screw rolled under the sofa, and she'd be giggling, phone in hand. I'd be passionately singing along to a classic rock song in the car, drumming on the steering wheel, completely lost in the moment, and I'd glance over to see the little red recording light glowing. She'd always say it was just for her, just a cute memory. I was a private person, and it made me uncomfortable, but I'd let it go because making her happy was my primary objective. I was a fool. I didn't see that her friends were always there too, their phones also silently capturing moments. They'd come over for dinner, and as I tried to explain a historical event I was excited about, my hands waving, my voice full of nerdy passion, their eyes would be wide, but not with interest. It was the predatory focus of a documentarian capturing a strange new species. They were collecting me, bit by bit. The project, as they later called it, culminated over a single weekend. They told me they wanted to create a day in the life of a teacher video, something to show their followers how noble my profession was. I was hesitant, but flattered. I thought maybe Ava was finally taking an interest in my world. They filmed me preparing my lessons, my desk covered in notes. They filmed me braiding papers, the red pen in my hand. They even filmed me practicing a lecture in our living room, trying to find the right words to make the past come alive for a bunch of jaded teenagers. But they were also filming other things. They recorded me tripping over the rug in the hallway. They got a close-up of the mustard stain I'd gotten on my shirt at lunch. They secretly recorded audio of me snoring on the couch after a long Friday. I was oblivious, a lamb performing for the butchers. The video dropped on a Tuesday. I remember the date, April 14th, the day my life ended. I was in the middle of a class discussing the American Revolution when I noticed the students were distracted, more than usual. They were looking at their phones under their desks, whispering, and then looking at me with a mixture of pity and cruel amusement. A cold feeling washed over me. During my break, I opened my laptop. My email was flooded. My social media, which I rarely used, was a firestorm of notifications. And then I saw it. A link from my own sister with the subject line, "Leo, what is this?" I clicked. The video was titled, "My Cringy Teacher Fiancé, You Won't Believe #5." It was a montage, a brutal 5-minute character assassination set to a goofy, clownish soundtrack. There I was, struggling with the IKEA bookshelf, sped up to look even more incompetent. There I was, singing in the car, my voice isolated and auto-tuned to sound screechy and awful. There I was, passionately explaining the Punic Wars, but they'd edited in fart noises every time I paused. They used the footage of me tripping, snoring, the mustard stain, all of it. The final clip was me, practicing my lecture, speaking with genuine passion, but they'd overlaid it with text bubbles mocking my clothes, my gestures, my earnestness. They had turned my life, my passions, my very essence into a joke for public consumption. They called me Captain Cringe. The video had over 1 million views in less than 24 hours. The comments section was a sewer of cruelty. People from all over the world were laughing at me. But the worst part was the comments from my own students. OMG, I knew he was a loser. This is Mr. Jensen? I have him for 3rd period, LMA. Captain Cringe for real. I felt the floor drop out from under me. I couldn't breathe. My world, the small, safe world I had so carefully built, had been invaded and burned to the ground for clicks. I was called into the principal's office before the end of the day. Mr. Harris looked tired. He had the video open on his monitor. He explained in a quiet, regretful voice that the school board had convened an emergency meeting. My actions, though not malicious, had created a disruptive environment. My authority was compromised. There was a morality clause in my contract. I was fired. I walked out of that school, the place I loved, carrying my belongings in a cardboard box. It was a cliché, a scene from a movie, but it was my life. When I got home, Ava and her friends were celebrating. There was champagne. They were screaming and laughing, staring at a laptop, watching the view counter climb. They saw me and cheered. "Leo, baby, we're viral!" Ava shouted, running to hug me. I pushed her away. The look on her face wasn't one of guilt. It was confusion, as if she couldn't comprehend why I wasn't thrilled. I tried to explain what had happened. My job, my reputation, my dignity, all gone. Her smile faltered, but only for a second. "Oh, honey, it's just a job," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "You can get another one. This is a real career opportunity for us. A brand already reached out for a sponsorship." That was it. That was the moment the last shred of my love for her died, turning into something cold and hard and dead in my chest. She wasn't just clueless. She was a monster. A smiling, perfectly filtered monster who would burn down someone's life for a sponsored post about teeth whitening strips. I didn't shout. I didn't scream. I was too empty for that. I just looked at her, at Chloe, at Jessica, and I saw them for what they were, hollow. There was nothing inside them but a desperate, bottomless hunger for validation from strangers. I told her it was over. I packed a single bag that night, leaving behind the books, the furniture we'd picked out, the entire life I thought we were building. She cried, but her tears felt like part of the performance. She even tried to film my departure, saying it would make a great follow-up video, a story of heartbreak. I took her phone and threw it against the wall. It was the only violent thing I did. As I walked out of that apartment, I felt the eyes of my neighbors on me. I heard someone whisper, "Hey, it's Captain Cringe." I got in my car and just drove, with no destination in mind, leaving the smoldering ruins of Leo Jensen's life behind me. I was nobody, heading nowhere, with nothing but a viral nickname and a profound, soul-crushing shame. The open road felt like an accusation, every mile marker a tombstone for the man I used to be. The laughter from that video echoed in my ears, a ghost that would take years to exorcise. The first few weeks were a blur of cheap motels and greasy spoon diners. I drove until my savings started to dwindle, ending up in a city hundreds of miles away where nobody knew my face or my humiliating moniker. I was running on fumes, both literally and emotionally. The shame was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. Every time I saw someone laugh at their phone, a jolt of panic shot through me. Were they laughing at me? Had the video found its way here? I realized I couldn't be Leo Jensen anymore. Leo was a joke, a meme, a piece of public property. Leo was dead. So
I killed him for good. I checked into a grimy boarding house in a forgotten part of the city and paid for a month in cash. I needed a new name, a new identity. I thought about my grandfather, a quiet, stoic carpenter named Ethan. He was a man who built things with his hands, a man whose worth was measured in solid, tangible objects, not in fleeting digital approval. I decided to borrow his name. From that day on, I was Ethan. Becoming Ethan meant erasing Leo. I shut down my social media, changed my phone number, and cut ties with everyone from my old life, even my family. I sent them one final cryptic email saying I needed to disappear for a while and that I was safe, and then I went dark. I couldn't bear the thought of them looking at me with pity, of them having to answer questions from their friends about their viral loser relative. The first job I found was washing dishes in a 24-hour diner. The work was brutal and mindless. For 10 hours a day, I stood in a cloud of steam, my hands submerged in scummy water, scrubbing away the remnants of other people's lives. The clatter of plates, the roar of the sprayer, the constant shouting from the cooks, it was a sensory assault that left no room for thought. And that was a blessing. I was too exhausted to think about Ava, too sore to dwell on the video. I was just a pair of hands, a machine for cleaning dishes. I worked, I went back to my tiny room, I slept, and I started over again. My world shrank to the four walls of that kitchen in my rented room. I was invisible, and for the first time since the video dropped, I felt a flicker of something like safety. No one here knew Leo. They just knew the quiet guy who showed up on time and scrubbed pots until they shined. After a few months, I saved enough to get out of the boarding house and into a small, bleak basement apartment. It smelled of damp concrete and loneliness, but it was mine. It was in that basement that I started to rebuild. I had no direction, no plan. The idea of going back to teaching was unthinkable. My confidence was shattered. How could I stand in front of a classroom when 1 million people had laughed at me for doing just that? I needed something else, something solitary. One day, walking home from the diner, I saw a broken rocking chair sitting by a dumpster. It was old, made of solid oak, but one of the rockers was split and the finish was peeling. Something about it called to me. It was discarded, broken, seen as worthless. I understood it. I hauled it back to my apartment and, with a few cheap tools I bought from a pawn shop, I started to work on it. I spent hours sanding down the old varnish, feeling the history of the wood under my fingertips. I researched how to repair the split rocker, meticulously gluing and clamping it. I found a quiet focus in the work that I hadn't felt since my teaching days. It was a different kind of lesson plan. This wasn't about ideas, it was about reality, about the physical truth of grain and joinery and patience. It took me a month of evenings after my shifts at the diner, but I restored it. The chair sat in my small living room, glowing with a new, quiet dignity. It was beautiful, solid, and real, and I had made it whole again. I sold it online for a small profit. It wasn't much, but it felt like more than money. It was proof.
Proof that I could still create something of value, that my hands weren't just for scrubbing plates. That small victory was a seed. I started haunting thrift stores and flea markets, looking for other broken pieces. A wobbly end table, a chest of drawers with a missing handle, a writing desk covered in water rings. My tiny apartment slowly filled with the smell of sawdust and wood stain. I kept my job at the diner, the mindless work paying my rent, but my real life began when I got home. I was teaching myself a new trade, one YouTube tutorial and library book at a time. I was learning about different types of wood, about dovetail joints, about the patient art of finishing. Each piece I restored was a piece of myself I was putting back together. I was still Ethan, the quiet guy. I barely spoke to my neighbors. I ate my meals alone. The fear of being recognized was a constant, low-level hum in the back of my mind. But the work gave me a purpose beyond just surviving. I was no longer just running from my past. I was actively building a different future, one hand-sanded surface at a time. The business, if you could call it that, grew slowly.
I created a simple website with anonymous photos of my work. The orders started as a trickle, then became a steady stream. People wanted the things I made. They valued the care and attention to detail I poured into each piece. After a year of living this double life, I had saved enough to take a terrifying leap. I quit my job at the diner. The cook just grunted, the manager shrugged and handed me my final paycheck, and I walked out of that steamy, noisy kitchen for the last time. The next day, I signed a lease on a small workshop in an industrial part of town. It was little more than a garage with a roll-up door, but to me, it was a palace. It was the first space that truly belonged to Ethan. I spent the first week just cleaning it, sweeping out the dust of a previous tenant, and setting up my tools. As I stood in the middle of that empty concrete floor, the smell of oil and old metal in the air, I didn't feel like Captain Cringe. I didn't even feel like Leo, the disgraced teacher. I felt like a craftsman, a builder. I was still alone, still haunted, but for the first time in a very long time, I felt a flicker of hope. I was building a new life from the wreckage of the old one, and it was going to be solid, real, and entirely my own. The next few years were defined by the rhythm of work. The workshop became my sanctuary and my world. I was the first one there in the morning, the smell of fresh coffee mixing with the sharp scent of sawdust, and the last to leave at night, my muscles aching with a satisfying fatigue. My business, which I named Phoenix Restoration in a moment of uncharacteristic symbolism, started to gain a local reputation. I poured all the discipline and meticulousness I once used for lesson plans into my craft. Each restored piece of furniture was a thesis statement, a testament to the idea that broken things could be made beautiful again. My hands, once soft and suited for holding books, became calloused and strong. I learned to read the story of a piece of furniture in its scratches and dents, to respect its history while giving it a future. My anonymity was my shield. As Ethan, the quiet woodworker, I was respected for what I could do, not ridiculed for who I was. Clients would come to the workshop and we would talk about wood, about design, about the life they hoped the piece would have in their home. They saw a focused artisan, not a viral meme. And with each successful project, the ghost of Captain Cringe grew a little fainter. I eventually hired my first employee, an older man named Sal who had been a carpenter his whole life and was looking for part-time work to keep him busy. He never asked about my past. He just looked at my work, nodded in appreciation, and showed me a better way to cut a tenon joint. We worked in comfortable silence most days, the only sounds being the whine of the saw or the scrape of a hand plane. It was in the 5th year of my new life that Clara walked into my workshop. The bell above the door jingled, and I looked up from a drafting table where I was sketching a design for a bookshelf. She was an architect, she explained, looking for someone to build custom cabinets for a historic home she was renovating. She had a no-nonsense energy about her, her eyes sharp and intelligent as she scanned the workshop, taking in the half-finished projects, the stacks of lumber, the organized chaos of my tools. She wasn't like Ava. There was no performance, no carefully constructed persona. She was just herself, direct and authentic. We talked for an hour about the project, about the challenges of matching the original woodwork, about the beauty of quarter-sawn oak. It was the longest conversation I'd had with a stranger in years, and it felt effortless. She appreciated the craft, the details. She saw the value in what I did. She hired me for the job, and over the next few months, she became a regular visitor to the workshop, checking on the progress. Our conversation started to drift from wood and joints to books, music, and the city. I learned she was a transplant too, drawn by the architecture and the quieter pace of life. I found myself looking forward to her visits, to the sound of the bell on the door that announced her arrival. There was a warmth and a genuine curiosity about her that slowly started to thaw the ice that had been around my heart for years. One afternoon, she found me struggling with a heavy slab of maple. Without a word, she put down her briefcase, rolled up the sleeves of her blazer, and helped me lift it onto the workbench. We stood there for a moment, both of us covered in a fine layer of sawdust, and she smiled, a real, unguarded smile. It was in that moment I realized I was in serious trouble. I asked her to dinner. I was terrified. It was the first time I had willingly stepped out of the safety of my workshop, out of the shell of Ethan. I half expected her to have secretly seen the video, to point and laugh halfway through the meal. But the evening was perfect. We talked for hours. She was funny and smart, and she listened with an intensity that made me seen in a way I hadn't sensed before Ava. The relationship grew slowly, cautiously on my part. We built it like I built my furniture, with care, patience, and a solid foundation.
Clara never pushed for details about my life before I came to this city. She seemed to understand that I had my reasons for being so private, and she respected it. But after 6 months, I knew it wasn't fair to her. I loved her, and love couldn't be built on a foundation of secrets. I had to tell her everything. I had to introduce her to Leo. I chose a quiet Sunday evening at my apartment. I made dinner, and my hand shook the entire time. After we ate, I took a deep breath, and I told her. I told her about being a teacher, about Ava and her friends, about the video, the name, Captain Cringe, losing my job, my old life, everything. I showed her the video on my laptop, forcing myself to watch it again for the first time in years. It was just as humiliating as I remembered. As it played, I couldn't look at her. I just stared at the screen, at the pathetic, mocked version of myself, and waited for the disgust, the pity, the inevitable end. When it was over, there was a long silence. I finally forced myself to look at her. She wasn't looking at me with disgust. Her face was tight with anger, an anger that wasn't directed at me. "Those horrible, horrible people," she said, her voice low and fierce. She reached across the table and took my hand. "That's not you, Ethan. That was something that was done to you. It's not who you are." Her acceptance was a key, turning a lock I didn't even know was still rusted shut. The shame I had carried alone for so long, when shared, became lighter. She didn't see me as a joke. She saw me as a survivor. Her reaction cemented everything. She was the one. From that day on, there were no more secrets. We moved in together a year later, into a small house with a big yard and a garage that I immediately converted into a home workshop. Our life was quiet and real. We'd spend weekends hiking in the mountains or working on the house or simply reading in companionable silence. She was my partner in every sense of the word. She celebrated my successes, from landing a big commission to finally perfecting a difficult joinery technique, and she supported me through the frustrations. My business continued to grow. I had to hire more people, move into a much larger commercial space. Phoenix Restoration became a well-known name in the region for high-quality custom woodwork. I was interviewed for a local business journal, my picture, Ethan's picture, printed next to an article praising my work. Life was good. It was stable. It was everything I thought I had lost forever. The memory of Ava in the video was no longer a raw wound. It was a scar, a part of my history, a reminder of the fire I had walked through to get here. I had a new name, a new career, a new love. I was whole again, not because I had forgotten the past, but because I had built a present so solid and beautiful that the past no longer had the power to destroy me. Life with Clara settled into a beautiful, predictable rhythm. We got married in a small ceremony in the backyard of the house we'd bought together, surrounded by a small group of friends and Sal from the workshop. There were no cameras, no hashtags, no performances. It was just a promise, made quietly and sincerely. A few years later, our son was born, and then our daughter. My world, which had once shrunk to the size of a miserable basement apartment, now felt boundless. My life was filled with the chaotic, wonderful noise of a family, the laughter of my children, the constant conversation with my wife, the familiar hum of the workshop. Phoenix Restoration had grown beyond my wildest dreams. We had a team of 10 skilled craftsmen, a showroom, and a backlog of orders that stretched for months. I wasn't just Ethan the woodworker anymore. I was a business owner, a husband, a father. The man named Leo Jensen felt like a character from a distant dream. I rarely thought about Ava or her friends. They were ghosts from a life I no longer lived, their memory sealed away in a part of my mind I had no reason to visit. The internet was a different place now. The viral stars of yesterday were forgotten. buried under a million new memes and trends. I assumed she had faded into the same obscurity she had tried so desperately to escape. I was wrong. Came as an email, slipping through my company's general inquiry form. The subject line was just my old name, Leo. My blood ran cold. I almost deleted it without opening, a reflexive flinch away from the past. But curiosity, or perhaps a need for finality, made me click. The message was from her. It was short, and it dripped with a cloying, manufactured sweetness. She wrote about how she thought of me often over the years, how she hoped I was well. She said she was a digital brand consultant now and had been following the success of my business. The lie was so transparent. She hadn't been following my business, she had been digging. She had found me. She ended the email by saying she would be in my city for a conference and would love to catch up and clear the air. I stared at the screen for a long time, the cheerful sounds of my kids playing in the other room a stark contrast to the cold dread coiling in my stomach. Clear the air? The air was clear. I had built a life in that clear air. She wanted to pollute it again. I showed the email to Clara that night. She read it, her expression hardening. "You don't owe her anything," she said simply, handing the phone back to me. "Not a response, not a second of your time." I knew she was right, but a small, stubborn part of me needed to see this through. I needed to face the ghost head on, not as the broken boy who fled in the night, but as the man I had become. I needed to prove to myself that she had no more power over me. So I replied. My response was even shorter than hers. "Fine. A coffee shop near my workshop. Tuesday, 2 p.m., 15 minutes. I wasn't agreeing to a reunion. I was scheduling an exorcism. The days leading up to it were tense. Old anxieties I thought I had buried began to surface. I found myself looking in the mirror, seeing the lines around my eyes, the gray in my hair, and wondering if she would still see the pathetic Captain Cringe. Clara was my anchor. She saw the turmoil in my eyes and, without me having to say a word, would just squeeze my hand, a silent reminder of the solid ground I now stood on. When Tuesday came, I walked into the coffee shop feeling strangely calm. This was my city, my turf. I chose a small table in the corner and waited. She arrived exactly on time, but she was no longer the vibrant, confident girl I remembered. The years had not been as kind to her as they had been to me. Her smile seemed forced, etched onto her face. The relentless chase for online relevance had left her looking tired and brittle. She was dressed in trendy clothes that looked a little too young for her, a walking billboard of fading relevance. She tried for a warm hug, but I extended a hand instead, keeping a professional distance. The small talk was excruciating. She asked about my life with a false brightness, and I gave her brief, factual answers. The business was good, I was married, I had children. With each fact, I could see a flicker of something in her eyes, surprise, envy, maybe regret. It was clear this wasn't the broken man she had expected to find. Finally, she got to the point. She pulled out her phone, her movements practiced and slick. She started talking about her new venture, a series of Where Are They Now videos about people who had gone viral years ago. "It's about redemption, Leo," she said, her voice full of fake sincerity. "It's about telling your side of the story, our story. People loved us together. The video, as problematic as it was, had insane engagement." Then came the pitch. She wanted to film a reunion, me and her, Captain Cringe and the girl who made him famous. She had it all planned out, a dramatic, tearful apology from her, my story of overcoming adversity, a final heartwarming shot of us shaking hands, having found closure. She said it would be good for my business, a human interest story that could drive sales. She was trying to sell me my own trauma, repackaged for a new audience. I let her finish her entire pathetic pitch. I just sat there, stirring my coffee, and I listened. When she was done, she looked at me with expectant eyes, the same look she used to give me when she wanted me to praise her latest post.
I put my spoon down, the clink of ceramics sounding unnaturally loud in the quiet cafe. "Ava," I said, and using her name felt like closing a book. "You seem to be under a few misconceptions. First, my name is Ethan." Her smile tightened. "Second, I don't need to tell my side of the story. My story isn't a 10-minute video for you to monetize. My story is the family I go home to. It's the business I built from nothing. It's the respect I've earned from my community and my employees. My life is my side of the story, and you are not entitled to a single frame of it." I stood up, leaving my full cup of coffee on the table. "I don't need your redemption, and I certainly don't need your closure. I got my own closure the day I drove out of that city and left you and your empty world behind." I looked at her one last time. The influencer, the brand consultant, the digital ghost. All I saw was a deeply sad and lonely person, still chasing the same high she had been chasing all those years ago. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger or shame. I felt nothing but a profound, liberating indifference. I walked out of that coffee shop without looking back. The sun was bright. The air was crisp. I got in my truck and drove back to my workshop, back to my real life. The ghost was gone. The exorcism was complete. I was finally completely free. Thank you for tuning in to Reddit Whispers. We've all faced moments when everything felt broken. What was your turning point? Leave it in the comments, because your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear right now.